Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be talking about something that's maybe not the easiest topic, but it's a really important one.
Yeah.
It's encopresis, and specifically we're going to be looking at it in adults with autism.
It really is surprising how often it's kind of just seen as a childhood issue.
Right.
But for a lot of people on the spectrum, it can continue into adulthood,
Yeah,
and that brings a whole other set of challenges with it.
absolutely. And we're actually basing this deep dive today on an article from Cheap ABA. It's titled Adult Autism and Encopresis, Involuntary Stool Leakage. What adults need to know beyond shame.
Hmm.
Even the title kind of hints at how much there is to unpack with this topic.
It really does. And that feeling of shame that comes along with this, it's something that a lot of people experience, and it really prevents them from getting the help that they need.
Absolutely.
But as the article points out, it's really important to remember that encopresis is a medical condition.
Yes.
It's not a personal failing.
Right, so let's just level set here for a second for our listener. When we say encopresis, what are we actually talking about?
So essentially, it's the involuntary leakage of stool, and it doesn't discriminate between daytime or nighttime.
Gotcha.
And it can be really, really distressing for the person who's experiencing it.
Yeah, and the article makes it really clear that for adults with autism, it's not just the physical part of it. It seems like there's just so much more at play there.
There is.
Yeah.
When you think about just the sensory sensitivities that are so common in autism, it can make it really difficult to even recognize the signals that your body's sending you that it's time to use the bathroom.
Right. It's almost like the signals are getting, kind of lost in translation somewhere. And then you add on that social stigma
Absolutely.
on top of it.
It's like you're dealing with this internally, and then you've got this whole other thing from society, and it's this huge stigma that comes with it.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to explain that to somebody who doesn't understand.
Right. Or worse, judges you for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So is it that kind of double whammy, the internal sensory challenges and then the external pressure from society? Is that what makes this so much harder for adults with autism?
I think that's a major factor, and the article also points to other things like diet, certain medications, even underlying medical conditions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All of that can really throw a wrench in things in terms of your digestive system.
Yeah.
And it leads to, bowel movements that are really unpredictable.
Yeah.
It adds to the anxiety and just that lack of control.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's definitely not just a simple, one-size-fits-all kind of situation. It's this whole web of different interconnected issues. So what does the article suggest in terms of managing this, especially when we're talking about adults with autism?
So the first thing that they emphasize is seeing a doctor.
Yeah.
And it's really important to find a doctor who understands autism,
Yeah, that makes sense.
because you want to rule out any underlying medical conditions
Yeah.
and get some guidance on the best way to move forward.
So you're catching it early and figuring out, exactly what you're dealing with. But what about like day-to-day management?
Well, they talk about creating a consistent bathroom routine,
Okay.
even if you don't feel the urge. They suggest setting regular times throughout the day to try using the bathroom.
Oh, interesting.
And the idea is that over time, that can help regulate your bowel movements.
So it's less about reacting to your body and more about proactively training it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
You're teaching your body a new rhythm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about things like diet? Does the article have any insight there?
Yeah, they mentioned things like increasing fiber intake, staying properly hydrated, and having regular meals.
I mean, that all sounds pretty straightforward, but I imagine with autism, any kind of change in routine can be a big deal.
Absolutely. And that's why they really stress working with a doctor or a nutritionist.
Okay.
Before making any really big changes to your diet, you don't want to add more stress on top of everything else.
That makes sense. And is this where therapy comes in? I know the article mentions ABA therapy specifically. What role can that play in managing encopresis?
So ABA can be really valuable, and especially for adults with autism. It provides this structured, individualized approach
Okay.
to developing coping mechanisms
Okay.
for managing the anxiety and reinforcing those healthy habits related to using the bathroom.
So it's not just about the physical act of going, it's about managing all that mental and emotional baggage that comes with it.
You got it. And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier with the shame and stigma.
Right.
The article really emphasizes the importance of having a supportive network,
Yeah.
whether it's family therapists, support groups.
Yeah, knowing you're not alone in this, I imagine, is huge.
Absolutely. And that's something we're going to dive into even deeper in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to explore that emotional side of it and talk about how to find the support and resources that you need.
Awesome. I am looking forward to that.
It's interesting, we often focus on the physical side of, a condition,
Yeah.
but we don't always acknowledge the emotional part.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a whole roller coaster that comes along with it.
It's true. We tend to focus on the what and not the how does this feel. And with Encopresis, especially for adults with autism, who may already be dealing with social anxieties and sensory overload, I imagine that emotional piece can be pretty heavy.
Yeah, it really is. Think about the constant worry,
Yeah.
of having an accident in public,
Oh, gosh, yeah.
or just the frustration of not having control over your own body.
Yeah.
That can be incredibly isolating,
Yeah.
emotionally draining.
Yeah. And then, I can see how that could lead to, that spiral of negative self-talk, like I'm not good enough or.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shame, guilt, worthlessness, all those emotions can get all tangled up with the condition,
Right.
and it makes it even harder to reach out for help.
It's like this vicious cycle, the emotional stress makes the physical symptoms worse, which then makes you feel even worse emotionally. It's hard to see a way out.
It is, and that's why the emphasis that the article puts on moving beyond that shame is so important.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about managing, the physical symptoms. We're talking about reclaiming your sense of self-worth,
Right.
feeling in control.
Yeah. And it's a really powerful reminder that Encopresis isn't a character flaw. This is a medical condition. And like any medical condition, it deserves treatment and compassion, starting with ourselves.
Absolutely. We need to be kind to ourselves, acknowledge that it's a struggle, and, give ourselves permission to ask for help.
It's recognizing that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. You're taking charge of your health, which kind of brings us to the support system. The article mentions, family therapists, support groups. Can you talk a bit more about what each of those can kind of offer?
Sure. So family can be a great source of emotional support, understanding practical help.
Yeah.
They can listen. They can offer encouragement and, help create that safe, comfortable environment at home.
And I imagine a therapist can really provide that space where you can unpack the emotional complexity of this condition and really, develop coping mechanisms to deal with the anxiety, the stress, and the negative self-talk.
That's right. And therapists who specialize in autism, they're especially valuable because they understand the specific needs and challenges that come with it.
And then there are support groups which offer that opportunity to connect with other people who truly get it.
Yeah, that's a big one, support groups. They provide that sense of community validation, hope.
Yeah.
It's a place to share your experiences, learn from others, and realize that you're not alone in this.
That sense of belonging, like you said, just knowing that other people have walked this path and come out the other side can be really powerful.
It can, and while the article doesn't explicitly mention online support groups, I think they're worth highlighting. They can be especially beneficial for individuals who might feel more comfortable connecting virtually.
That's a great point. Those online support groups offer that level of anonymity and accessibility. That can be really helpful. And it allows people from all over the world to connect with others who understand what they're going through.
Exactly, and don't underestimate the value of just connecting with people who get it.
So we've talked about seeking professional help, building a strong support network, and being kind to ourselves. What other tips or insights from the article do you think would be helpful for our listener today?
One that really stood out to me was the emphasis on communication.
Okay.
The article really encourages being open and honest with your healthcare providers, with your family, with anyone involved in your support network.
That makes sense. The more open you are about your experiences, the more equipped the people around you will be to support you.
It's about advocating for your needs,
Right.
seeking out resources that can help you manage this effectively.
Which can be tough, I imagine, especially for individuals with autism. Self-advocacy can be a challenge, and the whole process of seeking help can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
But, even small steps forward are a victory. Start by finding one person you trust. Could be a family member, a friend, a therapist, and share your struggles with them.
Yeah. And from there, you can gradually expand your support network, seek professional guidance. It's a journey, not a race. And every step you take towards self-care and healing, something to be proud of.
Well said, and I think that's a perfect segue into our final segment,
Mm.
where we'll wrap up our deep dive with some resources and parting thoughts for our listener.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on Encopresis and adults with autism, what are some key takeaways? What do you think our listeners should kind of walk away with today?
Well, I think the biggest one is, Encopresis is manageable. It's not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
And there are steps that you can take to improve your quality of life.
Yeah, we really need to shift that whole narrative, from one of shame and secrecy to one of empowerment and action.
Absolutely, and that starts with getting help.
Uh,
Talking to your doctor, connecting with a therapist, building a strong support system.
yeah.
Those are all really crucial steps in effectively managing this condition.
One thing that really stuck with me from the article was, how important it is to find a healthcare provider who really gets autism.
Yeah.
As we've been talking about all those sensory and social challenges that are so unique to autism, they can really impact how encopresis manifests and, just how it's experienced.
Absolutely. Finding someone who's sensitive to all of that
Yeah.
and who tailors their approach accordingly. I think that can make a huge difference.
And beyond the medical side of things, we can't forget about the emotional toll. It's something we've touched on, but it bears repeating.
You're right. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to feel frustrated, embarrassed,
Yeah.
overwhelmed at times.
Yeah.
Those emotions are valid, and it's
Mhm.
important to acknowledge them.
And seek support. And that support can come from a lot of different places, family, friends, therapists, even online support groups.
Yeah, and I think, for our listeners today, researching those online support groups
Hmm.
or forums that are specifically for adults with autism who are experiencing encopresis, that could be incredibly valuable.
Especially if you're feeling hesitant or unsure about where to even start, those online communities can offer that safe, anonymous space where you can connect with others who really get it.
Yeah, they can share their experiences, offer encouragement. It can be a real lifeline for anyone who's feeling isolated.
So, as we come to the end of our deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. Incopresis is not a life sentence. It's a challenge, absolutely, but it's a challenge that can be met with courage, compassion, and the right support. You are not alone. And there are resources out there to help you navigate this.
Seeking help is that first step towards, reclaiming your health, your well-being, and your sense of self-worth. Remember that.
Thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.